We continue now at the top of Daf Gimel Amud Aleph and Mesechet Shekalim. This is Shekalim Daf 3a. Gemara in the previous Amud said that according to Rabbi Yehuda, Adar Rishon is referred to as Stam. That's just referred to as plain Adar. If you say Adar, it means Adar Rishon according to Rabbi Yehuda. Adar Sheni Tinyan. When you refer to Adar Sheni, you should say Tinyan. You should say the second Adar. That gets referred to as Adar Sheni. That's Rabbi Yehuda's position. The Gemara continues at the two dots. Mesaknen es hadrochim yasarachovos ves mikvas hamayim v'yosim called tzorchei arab. And said in the Mishnah that on the 15th of Adar we fix the roads, we fix the areas where there's water for people who are traveling, because of the fact that we're trying to fix things up so people on Pesach will be able to travel in from far away to Yerushalayim. So the Gemara now quotes the Tosefta and Moed Katan. The Tosefta is talking about things that are allowed to be done on Chol HaMoed. Elohein Tzorchei Harabim. The following things are needs of the public. They can be done on Chol HaMoed. Done in Dinei Mamanis, V'Dinei Nefashos, Dinei Makas. You can judge all kinds of court cases, monetary, capital cases, cases of lashes. Upodin Arochim, V'Charomim, V'Hekdeshos. You're allowed to redeem various things of Hekdesh. Umashkin es HaSota. We can give the Sota to drink. V'Sorfen es HaPora. We can burn the Para Aduma. V'Orfen Egla Arufa. We can break the neck of the Egla Arufa. V'Rotzen Eved Ivri. We're allowed to pierce the ear of an Eved Ivri who's going to continue to serve. Umetarin es HaMetzora. You can go through the purification process of a Metzora. Umefarken es HaMinol Me'al Gabe Ho'imam. You're allowed to take the shoe after the imam. That's the item that holds the shoe when they're making the shoe. Ve'in Machzir no San Tamon. But on Chol HaMoed, you're not allowed to place the shoe back on the imam. And Tanina, and we further learn, Mashkin Beis HaShalchin on Chol HaMoed, you're allowed to irrigate the fields that are on the mountains. They're not able to retain the irrigation from the rain because it runs down the mountains. Umitzayin and Al Akvaris, and it also says, on Chol HaMoed, you're allowed to mark the grave sites. So the Gemara now asks, Lo Kvar Tzayin o Me'adar. In our Mishnah, didn't it already said that we marked all the grave sites in Adar? So why does it say over here that on Chol HaMoed you mark the graves, if anyways you already did that from Adar, from the 15th of Adar? So the Gemara answers, V'tiftar, you can answer, Sheyarad Shetav Shel Geshamim V'shatvu. It rained a lot and that wiped away the markings that we made on the graves, and that's why it says over here you're allowed to do that on Chol HaMoed as well. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, quoting further from the Mishnah in Moed Katan. It says, V'yotz and Alf ala Kilayim. On Chol HaMoed you're allowed to go out on Kilayim, meaning if you see anything growing that might be Kilayim, you're allowed to rip it out of the ground. So again, the Gemara asks, Lo Kvar Yotzu Me'adar. Again, our Mishnah said they already did this in Adar. Why are they doing this again on Chol HaMoed? And the Gemara says, Tiftar Shahoisa Hashana Afela V'Yein Hatzmachin Nikarim. Maybe this particular year was a year that's an Afela, meaning things grew a little bit late. You couldn't yet see the Kilayim, so now they have to do it on Chol HaMoed. And the Gemara continues, Minayin L'tzion. Where do we know? Where is there a source from the Torah to this idea of marking a grave so people know where the Tumah is? Rabbi Birchia, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Bas Yaakov B'Shem Rabbi Chunya Deves Chivrin. Rabbi Yosa has a different version who said it. Amri Lo Rabbi Yaakov Baracha B'Shem Rabbi Chunya Divras Chivrin. And another version, Rabbi Chizkiya, Rabbi Uziel Breder Rabbi Chunya Deves Chivrin B'Shem Rabbi Chunya Deves Chivrin. In any case, they say the following source: V'Tamei Tamei Yikra. It says that the person should call out that he is Tamei. Kidei Shetehei Hatuma Kora Loch B'Fiyah. The Omeres Loch Parosh, the idea, the drasha from the pasuk is that Tumah should almost call out to you with its mouth and say to separate, and that's from this pasuk we learn a source that you should mark graves as well, so the Tumah is clear to everybody. And the Gemara continues with another source, Rabbi Ila B'Shem Rav Shmuel Bar Nachman. Rabbi Ila in the name of Rav Shmuel Bar Nachman says as follows, the pasuk says, V'yavru ha'ovrim ba'aretz v'ra etzem adam uvana etzlon tzion, that's the pasuk. So we darshan as follows, etzem from the word bone, mikan shemitzayin and al ha'atzamos, that shows that you have to make some kind of a siman, a sign, when there are bones, tumah coming from bones. Adam, what do we learn from the word Adam? Mikan shemitzayin and al hashedra v'hagolgolas, that shows that you have to make some kind of a siman when there's the bones of the spine and the skull. Uvana, what do we learn from the word uvana? Mikan shemitzayin and al gabe even kavua. That teaches us that we should make the siman on top of a stone that is mechuber lakarka. It has to be set into the ground. Im omer at agabe even talusha, because if you said you're going to do it on a stone that's not fixed to the ground, afhi holeches umitame b'makom acher. So then it's going to end up rolling somewhere else, and you're going to cause tumah in a place. You're going to say there's tumah in a place where there really isn't tumah. And then the pasuk says etzlo means to say l'makom tahara. That you have to do it in an area of tahara, meaning you do it next to the tumah. You don't do it directly on the tumah. And Sion, what do we learn from the word Sion? Mikan L'Tzion, that shows again that you have to make this kind of a siman to indicate that there is Tumah. And the Gemara continues along the same lines, quoting a Braisa, Motza Evan Achas Mitzuyenes. Let's say a person finds a single stone that has the siman, that has this plaster on it, indicating Tumah. Afa pishain mekayim and kain, even though it's not normal to have one stone. Hamal oleh tameh, if someone makes an oel over that stone, he's tameh. Ani omer, because I say meis mitzuyan vayanasim tachteh, that really this siman is right above the mace. Now the idea here is, even though normally you don't assume that, again, the stone is right on top of the mace, it's supposed to be next to it in an area of tahara. In this particular case, when you find a single stone, you have to assume that maybe the tumah is right beneath it, and if you're ma'al oleh, it's going to be a problem. But the brisa continues, hayushtayim, if you have two stones, so then already the indication is that the grave is between the two stones. So then amayel aleyan tar, somebody has an oel over them is tahar, uveineyen tameh, and between them is going to be tameh. And the brisa continues, im haya choresh ben sayim, let's say between the two stones is like a plowed area, very unlikely that there's a grave between them. Harehein ki yechidios, that makes a separation, and they become like individual stones, and so then the opposite is true. Beinehen tar, between them is going to be tar, usvivoseyen tameh, but around them, meaning right over them, that's going to be considered tameh. And the Gemara continues, Tani, we learned in another brisa, ein mitzayin al habasar, you're not allowed to make a siman over, let's say you just have a kazayis of basar, of a dead body. Why? Shema nisachel habasar, because the concern is, if the basar deteriorates, becomes less than a kazayis, it's not tameh. And now you have a siman that an area is tameh when it's really not tameh. So therefore you don't put any tziyun there at all. Rabbi Yusta bar Shunim ba kume Rabbi Mona. So Rabbi Yusta bar Shunim asked in front of Rabbi Mona, v'lo nimtza mitame taras l'mafreya. Isn't that going to cause us to retroactively make things that are tar tameh? In other words, there's going to be a mistake over here, because if you don't mark the area, then the time when it is a kazayis, when it hasn't yet gotten smaller, things are going to be tameh. You're not going to realize it. You're going to have to go back and correct your mistake. So Amar Lei, so he said to him, Mutav she yiskalkalu bo l'shah. Better we have a mistake for a small period of time. V'al yiskalkalu bo l'yolam, not have a mistake forever. In other words, there is going to be a point in time where it's going to turn into less than a kazayis. And from that time on, forever, there's no tumah. So it's better not to mark the area, even though for a short amount of time, when it is a kazayis, it's causing a little bit of a kilkul. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Barishon in the beginning, hayu okrin umashlichim lifneihem. They used to uproot the kilayim. The messengers would go out, as we said in the previous Mishnah, and they would uproot if they saw kilayim growing in someone's field, and they would throw it into their field in order to embarrass them that you're growing kilayim. Misharabu over avera, when there became more people doing these averas, hayu mashlichin lidrachim. Then they started throwing it into the streets instead of throwing it into the property. This will be explained in the Gemara. And then his skinu shumafkir as kol asada. Eventually, they made a new takana that if they see someone growing kilayim, they're going to use the power of hefker bez and hefker to make their entire field hefker. And the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Tani was taught. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Barishona hayu okrim ashlichim lifnein. Originally, again, they would uproot the kilayim and throw it in front of them into their own property. But then the owners of the property were actually happy for two reasons. First of all, here they were pulling out the weeds of their field. They're doing them a favor. And also they're getting pleasure, they're getting benefit from the kilayim, because now you're throwing what you pick into the field, and now the animals can eat it. It's basically a benefit for the person in two ways. Misharabu over avera. So then when there became more people who were doing the avera, hayu mashlichan al adrachim, instead of throwing it into the person's property, that way they got a benefit because their animals could eat the food. They said, we're not going to do that. They started throwing it into the streets. But nevertheless, hayu smechim, they were still happy. Shayu menachshin, so they're saying, because at least, at the very least, the people were pulling the stuff out of the fields. They were helping their fields to grow by pulling out the weeds. So his skinu shu mafkir and kol asadakula. So that's why they made a new takana. People growing kilayim were going to be mafkir the entire sada. And the Gemara continues, minayin shehefker bezin hefker. How do we know the principle of hefker bezin hefker, that bezin has the ability to make other people's property hefker? T'chsiv, because the pasuk says, this is a pasuk by Ezra. It says, v'chol asher lo yavo l'shloshes hayamim batzas hasorim v'hazikenim. Anyone who didn't come in 3 days by the council of the sarim, of the officers and the elders, yachram kol rechusho v'yivdol mikal agola. All of his property is going to become chayrim. He's going to be separated from the congregation. So you see from this pasuk that the Bezdin had the ability to declare that things were hefker. And the Gemara says further, minayin shi peturim and amaisers. How do you know that if you have hefker, Bezdin, hefker, all of that property is going to be hefker to the extent that it's even patur from maisers? Rabbi Yonasan breder Rabbi Yitzchak Baracha shama lo min hado. Rabbi Yonasan, the son of Rabbi Yitzchak Baracha, he understood it from the following brisa. The brisa says, ein ma'avernes hashana. You're not allowed to make a leap year. You're not allowed to add an adar sheni, lo b'shvius, not during the Shemitah year, v'lo b'matzoi shvius, and not a matzoi shvius, meaning on the first year right after Shemitah. V'yemivrua harezu muberes, And if you do make a leap year in such a year, it's still going to be effective. It will be a leap year. So now the Gemara makes a diak. Isn't it true that extra month that you're adding, when they decide to make, let's say, the Shemitah year a leap year, so you have an extra Adar, that extra month is going to be pater from Meiser, because everything is going to be Hefker, like the laws of the Shemitah year. So therefore you see again that Hefker Bez and Hefker can make it pater from Meisers. So the Gemara says, Ad Kidon Shavias. Well, you've explained why you're not allowed to add a month during the Shemitah year, because we don't want to add a month that people aren't able to work their fields. But Matzai Shvias Mai, what's the big deal about adding a month on Matzai Shvias, on the first year of the cycle? So the Gemara says, Amar Bavo Rabbi Bon Shalo L'Rabos B'Isr Chodesh. He says the answer is that we don't want to have an extra month of Isr Chodesh, meaning you have no old grain, because last year was the Shemitah year, and now you have a new year. If you're going to add an Adar Sheni, you have more time where you have to face the problems of dealing with the fact that you can't eat Chodesh. And the Gemara continues, Reb Zeira B'Shem Reb Elazar. Reb Zeira says in the name of Reb Elazar, Hada De'at Omar Ad Shelo Hitte Rebbe Lahavi Yerek Mechutz La'aretz La'aretz. This whole prohibition of having a leap year in the Shemitah year, that's only true before Rebbe allowed a person to bring vegetables from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. Aval Mishehitte Rebbe Lahavi Yerek Mechutz La'aretz La'aretz. But once Rebbe allowed people to bring vegetables from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, so then he shvius, he shall shar shnei shavua. There's no difference between the Shemitah year and other years, because there's not really a concern that you're going to run out of food if you extend the Shemitah year, because you can always bring in food from outside Eretz Yisrael. The reason why originally they couldn't bring in food from outside Eretz Yisrael was there was a concern because Eretz Ha'amim, the land from outside of Eretz Yisrael, was considered Tameh. The Gra takes out this line here of Tani Ein Ma'avrin. Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Mana says, Hada diat Amar, that which you said, Borishona, Shayu Hashanim Kesiknon, that which you said in terms of the first year of the Shemitah cycle, that we said we don't want to make it a leap year, because again, you don't want to extend the time that there's an Isser Chodesh. The Isser Chodesh doesn't go away until Tes Zayin Nisan. You don't want to extend the Isser Chodesh, because there's not a lot of grain left after a Shemitah year. That's only true when it used to be in the beginning, when the years were normal. But now the years, the agriculture doesn't work normally. In other words, most food is not ready anyhow right away by Nisan time. So if you extend another month, it's not like we're really extending the Isser Chodesh, because the food itself is not ready, the grain's not ready anyway, agriculturally speaking. So he shvius, he shar shnei shavua. So we treat Shemitah year, or really it means here the first year of the Shemitah cycle, Matzai Shvius. We treat Matzai Shvius the same as any other time of the year. And now the Gemara continues along the same lines. Tani shal beis Rabbi Gamliel ivruah b'matzai shvius miyad. It was taught that in the Bezin of Rabbi Gamliel, they made a leap year on Matzai Shvius right away, meaning they had no problem making a leap year on Matzai Shvius. The Gemara now returns to what it said before. The Gemara had said before, from the fact that you can make a leap year on a Shemitah year, that should show that Hefker, Bezin, Hefker makes things pater from Meiser as well, because in that extra month, when the Bezin is extending the Shemitah year, everything's going to be Hefker, it's all going to be pater from Meiser. So Amar Rabbi Avon says, In min hadol lesat shva min haklum. From that you have no proof at all, because there's actually a pasuk that says you should extend, you should make a leap year, so it's not Hefker, Bezin, Hefker. The Torah itself is saying everything is Hefker as part of Shemitah year, because the pasuk says, Shomer es chodesh ha'aviv, it says you have to keep the month of the spring, Shomreyu sheyaviu b'chidushu, in other words, it has to be at the proper time, so you have to make a leap year that the spring should occur at the proper time. So the Gemara instead says, V'heida amrinon da, rather the proof that Hefker, Bezin, Hefker can even make stuff pater from Meisers is from the following. It says, Godish shelo loke tachtov. Let's say you have a situation where you mix up the leket with the actual personal grain of the balabayas. So kol anogos ba'aretz harein shel aniyim. Everything that's touching the earth belongs to the aniyim, meaning it's a knas, that here you went ahead and you covered up the leket with your own grain, so everything becomes the property of the aniyim. V'yomer Rabbi Ami, and Rabbi Ami said, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Gimel Amud Beis.